Hi there, yep, great and glorious, you can be famous one day, Nick Dutch yet again. Getting rather tired as I'm continuing my marathon YouTube video session. Still going through the Wikipedia article on pseudoscience, trying to find out what it is, whether it does apply to the occult. Just by what they've told us on Wikipedia, pseudoscience appears to be a pseudoscience. Just the idea of pseudoscience is pseudoscientific. And the article goes on, the following have been proposed to be indicators of poor scientific reasoning. So it says here, the following have been proposed to be indicators of poor scientific reasoning. Not, this is how you can recognize pseudoscience. So essentially, this is what the real scientists have to bear in mind. This is what the article is saying, this is what the real scientists have to bear in mind so that they can be considered to have good scientific reasoning. Firstly, use of vague, exaggerated or untestable claims. Assertion of scientific claims that are vague rather than precise and a lack of specific measurements. Failure to make use of operational definitions, so publicly accessible definitions of the variables, terms and objects of interest so that the person other than the definer can independently measure or test them. See also reproducibility. Failure to make reasonable use of the principle of parsimony, i.e. failing to seek an explanation that requires the fewest possible additional assumptions where multiple viable assumptions are possible. See Occam's razor, which of course you guys know about. Use of obscurationist language, the misuse of apparently technical jargon or in an effort to give claims to the superficial trappings of science, which is of course what Venom Fang X does rather a lot, if my memory serves me correctly. Lack of boundary conditions. Most well-supported scientific theories possess well-articulated limitations under which the predicted phenomena do and do not apply. Lack of effective controls such as placebo and double-blind and in experimental design. But there are certain forms of scientific methods which do not have placebo and double-blind in them. So again, these are interesting guidelines, but they're not hard and fast, 10 commandments of what is bad science. Over-reliance on confirmation rather than refutation. Now that's an important statement, because you can't just go for confirmation. Believers go for, I've mentioned the idea of belief, haven't I? And that believers will always look for confirmation, or will see something as confirmation even though it is not confirmation. Assertions that do not allow the logical possibility that they can be shown to be false by observation of physical experiments. You see also falsifiability. Assertion of claims that the theory predicts something that it has not been shown to predict. Now that depends upon your circumstances, but an interesting point. Assertion of claims which have not been proven false must be true, and vice versa. Well, that's another standard bit of religious hokum. So yeah, that's important. You need to have a bit of self-criticism. Over-reliance on testimonial, anecdotal evidence, or personal experience. What the fuck do they mean by over-reliance? When is reliance over-reliance? If you're experimenting upon yourself, you're experimenting based upon personal experience. And that's still within the scientific method. This evidence may be useful for the context of discovery, i.e. hypothesis generation, but should not be used in the context of justification, or within certain limits. Pseudoscience, so it says here, we've already shown that should prove that pseudoscience does not exist, often presents data that seems to support its claims while suppressing or refusing to consider data that conflicts with its claims. This is an example of selection bias, which is of course something we have to bear in mind, okay? But remember, this whole section is all about how to recognize not very good science. It's not about pseudoscience. That sentence starts with the word pseudoscience, but we've already shown that pseudoscience doesn't actually exist. Okay, it goes on the distortion of evidence or data that arises from the way that the data is collected. It's sometimes referred to as the selection effect. Reversed burden of proof. In science, the burden of proof rests on those making a claim. not on the critic. So even critics of the occult, well, if someone wants to criticize me as a pseudoscientist, this is my proof that I'm not a pseudoscientist, because pseudoscience does not exist. Pseudoscientific arguments may neglect this principle and demand that skeptics demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that a claim, e.g. an assertion regarding the efficacy of a novel therapeutic technique, is false. So the skeptics have to demonstrate that. We've already discovered that skeptics are, just from what's written here in Wikipedia, we've discovered that skeptics are essentially using censorship techniques and lies and exaggerations and misrepresentations just to block out something which could be true and or could be important. So for it to say here that it's up to the skeptics to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that a claim is false has issues, because their method is going to be biased, because they're operating with the idea that something is pseudoscience because they haven't actually investigated the full ramifications of whatever the claim is that they're labeling as pseudoscience. Oh God, this is getting me all hot under the collar. Getting angry can be fun, okay, but I'm just going to carry on with this reading. Appeals to holism as opposed to reductionism. Proponents of pseudoscientific claims, especially in organic medicine, alternative medicine, neuropathy, and mental health, often resort to the mantra of holism to explain negative findings. I would say that all mantras, as this excerpt defines them, will have some issues with them. We can't carry on coming out with the same phrase to try and dumb people down or try and convince them that something is real or important. Everything's got to be analyzed. Lack of opening to testing by other experts. Evasion of peer review before publicized results. We've already seen that peers won't review or are unlikely to review things that they regard as being pseudoscientific, because the things that they regard as being pseudoscientific is done as a form of censorship and they're not going to get involved with it, okay? Apparently it's called science by press conference. Some proponents of theories that contradict accepted scientific theories avoid subjecting their ideas to peer review, sometimes on the grounds that peer review is biased towards established paradigms, and sometimes on the grounds that assertions cannot be evaluated adequately using standard scientific methods. By remaining insulated from the peer review processes, these proponents forego the opportunity of corrective feedback from informed colleagues. Yeah, reanalysis or taking things from a different point of view will be fine, provided, of course, the scientists or investigators in question could properly reproduce the experiment and are willing to. Okay, I'm going to stop the video again. We'll go back to the article. Give me a few seconds, okay?